Dragon's Dogma 2 is shaping up to be one of the biggest games of 2024 and one of the biggest RPGs of recent memory. It offers potentially hundreds of hours of replayability and adventure, but where do you start? Well, we've compiled dozens of articles, interviews, and hands-on gameplay impressions to come up with the ultimate beginner guide you need to watch before you play. This is 101 things you need to know before playing Dragon's Dogma 2. Alright, let's start with the basics, including platforms and release dates. Dragon's Dogma 2 will be releasing on both PC and consoles, that is specifically Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5. And if you're watching this before Dragon's Dogma 2 goes live, the release date is March 22nd, 2024. For you PC enthusiasts out there, we should also talk about the system requirements. Dragon's Dogma 2 sets the minimum requirements for processors at a Core i5-10600 or Ryzen 5 3600. 16 gigabytes of memory at a minimum is what you'll want. And for the recommended PC specs, that's going to come in at a Core i7-10700 and a Ryzen 5 3600X in terms of CPUs. For GPUs, we're talking GeForce RTX 2080 or a Radeon RX 6700. Capcom has also confirmed the minimum free space on an SSD required for this game. You want about 100 gigabytes of free space for this one, as it is a pretty large game. But now let's jump into the heart of Dragon's Dogma 2, which is the story. Now, if you played the original title, there will be plenty of familiar themes and ideas here, as Dragon's Dogma 2 places you again in the shoes of the Arisen, the hero whose heart has been claimed by a dragon. The Arisen begins the journey confined in an underground dungeon as a prisoner. We also know that amnesia plays a part, possibly erasing some memories from our past, but there is a big question. Could this Arisen be an imposter manipulated by unseen forces? Our journey through Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to take us through multiple different kingdoms, each with its own people and political intrigues. Vermund, we know, is the human kingdom, where a false Arisen is starting to take shape. Beyond the kingdom of humanity lies the Sacred Arbor. This is going to be the sanctuary for the reclusive elves. The unique elvish language that they speak is going to add an extra layer of complexity to the game, making communication with them a little bit challenging unless you have the right pawn by your side who can serve as a translator. We'll talk more about pawns and their special abilities in just a minute. And while elves are currently not a playable race, it was confirmed that we can find elvish followers, such as the twins Glyndwr and Dorian, to recruit into our party along the way. Now, venturing further out, we'll encounter the nation of Batal. This is where the new beast race lives, and it has a distinct culture, rugged landscapes, steep canyons, and ancient ruins. Here, pawns are deemed harbingers of misfortune, and the citizens of Batal worship something called the lambent flame, an emblem of protection against calamity. Now, a notable addition to the playable races in Dragon's Dogma 2 for this new title is that beast race that we mentioned, also called Beastren. So it's basically a feline race, looks kind of similar to races like Khajiit from the Elder Scrolls series, for example. So again, in terms of playable races, we'll have the Beastren alongside humans. You'll have those two starting race options for your Arisen main character as well as your pawn once the game launches. Before we move on, a quick word from today's video sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is the world's most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, with the ability to play over 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships in dynamic combined arms PvP battles. Every vehicle is insanely detailed and modeled down to their individual components like engines, fuel tanks, weapons, and crew, which adds another layer of realism and strategy to combat. These vehicles look absolutely amazing with realistic graphics and sound design, and you can play War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Use my link in the pinned comment or video description to sign up. New players and those who haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack on PC or consoles that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of a premium account. This is available for a limited time only, so don't miss it. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and let's get right back into it. Now, speaking of character creation, the customization options present in Dragon's Dogma 2 are pretty insane, actually. You can even download a free version of the character creator tool if you want to play around with the options and design your perfect character before you download the full game, which I think is an awesome feature. I did do a full walkthrough of this, which I'll put in the upper right hand corner if you want to check out that video next. But Dragon's Dogma 2 uses the RE engine, and its amazing capabilities are definitely on full display in this character creator. There are several preset options you can choose from to determine your starting body type and height. These are just basic options, and I do recommend using the full custom design editor so you can create your Arisen and your main pawn exactly the way you want them to look. Now, in the creator, you start by customizing your basic head type, which covers the general shape of the face and the style of the hair, and it basically lets you refine your choices down from a big list to what you think you'll want in the end, but don't worry, you can make further changes after this step. And doing this unlocks the 5 main areas of the character creator, which are body, head, hair, makeup, and tattoos and markings. And each area then allows you to get ultra detailed, oftentimes down to individual muscle groups like the back muscles, traps, even biceps versus forearms. The level of detail, again, is pretty incredible. You can also make your muscles more or less defined using the muscle strength slider. And there are also options for the overall movement style of your character so that you can walk tilted forward or even backward. And you can angle your arms or knees more or less to also change the way your walk looks. And when you dive into the full head customization, for example, the options can get overwhelming. For example, for customizing your character's nose, you have a total of 13 different sliders, including nostril width, height, and overall size. Way too many examples for me to list here in this video, but hopefully you get the idea. There are dozens and dozens of skin types, hair types, including facial hair, body hair, and finally over 60 different tattoo styles available to choose from, which can be applied to nearly any body part, and you can freely rotate these or resize them, recolor them however you want. There are even patches of dirt or scars that you can apply to your character as well, so yeah, tons of options here. Now, before you start Dragon's Dogma 2, you also will want to customize your main pawn. Now, this uses the same character creation tool that we use for our Arisen, and the pawn has the same playable races and starting vocation options as well. More on starting vocations in just a minute, by the way. Now, you will get eventually a total of 3 pawns, and the 2 other ones, so excluding the main pawn, you'll be drafting those from a summoning stone called the Rift. And this allows you to choose from the online network of pawns. Basically, the other 2 pawns you can choose would be like main pawns in another player's game. So even though Dragon's Dogma 2 is a single-player RPG, there still is kind of this online component, which is pretty interesting, where your pawn becomes like a global traveler and gets shared with other players around the world, which is pretty cool. Now, unlike most games where you have tons of quest icons and map markers, Dragon's Dogma 2 actually relies on your pawns as well as other NPCs to steer you towards objectives and quests via dialogue. So encountering pawns with specific knowledge adds an additional layer of depth to the game, and it's one of the best ways to truly get the most out of the world. Pawns are further evolved in Dragon's Dogma 2 with the inclusion of pawn inclinations. In the game, you can select inclinations such as kind-hearted, calm, simple, straightforward, and these directly influence how your pawns engage in combat. Each inclination also comes with its own set of voice actors, pitch modulations, as well as distinct social actions. Now, Dragon's Dogma 2 also incorporates something called specializations for pawns. These special abilities allow pawns to acquire new skills. For example, we mentioned Woodland Wordsmith. This is the specialization that enables understanding and interpreting the elf language. There's another specialization that empowers pawns to use healing items, for example, so there's tons more customization here as well. And a slightly more edgy feature that we don't know a ton about yet is called Dragon's Plague. This is a contagious disease sort of condition that infects pawns as they travel between other players. Now, it seems like it grants them a buff to their abilities at first, but if the Dragon's Plague goes untreated, it's said that a devastating calamity will occur, though what this actually means in terms of gameplay changes, we're not quite sure about yet. So now that you know all about the main character, the Arisen, your devoted pawns, let's talk about vocations next, which are essentially character classes in the Dragon's Dogma series. Now, many vocations from the original game are returning with a few tweaks as well as new vocations thrown in to make things a lot more interesting. Now, there are 10 confirmed vocations that players can choose from. First, we have the 4 starting vocations, which are Fighter, Archer, Mage, and Thief. These vocations are available to the Arisen as well as pawns. Next are the advanced vocations, which include the Warrior and the Sorcerer. These are also available to both Arisens and pawns. And finally, we have Arisen exclusive vocations, sometimes called hybrid vocations, and these only the main character can use. This includes Magic Archer, Mystic Spearhand, Trickster, and the Warfarer. Now, for sake of time, I'll cover each class option here briefly, but I'll also have a much more detailed vocation guide, which you can check out if you're interested. Now, first, let's start with the Fighter, the vocation that excels in melee combat. Fighters can slice through enemy ranks and deliver powerful blows, while also using their shields to protect themselves and their allies. So if you like the idea of being a frontline protector, charging into the midst of battle, bashing your enemies into submission, the Fighter is definitely a good choice for you. The Fighter is going to operate like it did in the previous game, very much a RPG sort of main tank character with access to taunt abilities, crowd control, and defensive capabilities. Shields are the Fighter's specialty, so you'll have skills like Shield Bash that allow the fighters to stagger enemies. You can even use your shield to land on after jumping from a high place to avoid fall damage, which is a pretty cool skill as well. Next, we have the Archer vocation, specializing in long-range attacks using a bow and arrow. They perform their attacks from afar and also specialize in avoidance and maneuverability, including several variations on jump attacks, jumping towards enemies, jumping away, firing off your bow, things like that. Now, special options for arrows exist, which allow you to poison or otherwise debilitate your enemies from afar, making them easy targets for your allies. And because so many dangerous flying enemies exist in Dragon's Dogma 2, such as harpies, having some type of range damage support in your party will definitely be very important. Now, if you're familiar with the original Dragon's Dogma, you know the Strider class has basically been split into two different versions, that being the Archer, which we already talked about, and now the Thief vocation, which we'll look at next. The Thief attacks with deadly speed, dealing rapid and consecutive strikes with daggers in both hands, while also having excellent mobility. They quickly step away after striking, exploiting openings, and clinging on to enemies to inflict heavy damage. The Thief vocation also has the ability to steal from NPCs. You can also use bombs to distract or damage your enemies. But at its core, it's simply a fast-paced melee DPS class, great for shredding enemies to bits and then quickly escaping out of harm's way. Next up, we have the Mage vocation, which is the perfect starting support class in Dragon's Dogma, useful for both increasing your party's damage as well as healing them. For example, mages in Dragon's Dogma are well known for their magical boons that they can apply to allies, such as increased fire, ice, and lightning damage. So you apply those effects to your ally's weapon to give them those bonus effects. But the more advanced and powerful your spell is in Dragon's Dogma 2, the longer the cast time will be. So if you plan on playing a mage, make sure to partner up with some beefier pawns that can protect you and draw the enemy's attention away. And next up, we have the Advanced vocations, which players and pawns can eventually upgrade to. More on the upgrade process in just a moment. But first, we have the Warrior vocation. This is basically identical to its predecessor from Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. The Warrior is meant to be an advanced martial class, taking the classic Japanese style of anime two-handed damage dealer to the extreme. You can think of Cloud from Final Fantasy or Guts from Berserk, but this vocation is all about the timing. Many of these big two-handed attacks are going to require significant charge time to execute, but if pulled off perfectly, will result in huge damage. Think big risk, big reward. Our other advanced vocation is the Sorcerer, which specializes in big damage magic attacks. Their magic is conjured with both hands through a large staff and can change the tide of battle if you're able to find a safe place and determine the correct moment to strike. Now, that's because the Sorcerer's spells take much longer to cast, but when you do actually pull those off, you'll be raining down the nukes in the form of magical fireballs, meteors, ice storms, electricity, and more. This looks like it'll be one of the top-end damage spike vocations for players who really want to burn their enemies to cinders. Now, I should also mention, if there are two or more sorcerers casting the same spell, there is a feature called sync casting, which both speeds up the casting time and also empowers the spell to do even more damage and effects. And if you want to speed up those casted spells even more, you should use the ability called Quick Spell. This drains your stamina but allows you to cast spells afterwards much quicker. And don't worry, if your stamina gets too low, you can always cast the Galvanize spell to stand still and recover your stamina extremely fast. But that leads us to our hybrid vocations, which are basically special classes only available to the main character, Arisen. But first, there is the Magic Archer vocation, which excels in long-range combat using magical arrows. Magic Archers look to be an awesome support class and a great group healer as well, as certain magic arrow types can heal allies. Other types of arrows are focused completely on damage, and one in particular acts like a heat-seeking missile, This ability is known as Flame Fang Arrow, and it allows the archer full control of the arrow itself, directing it to a target location where it then explodes. Frost Thunderbolt is another useful magic archer attack, which chills enemies and freezes them in place when you land enough arrows, allowing you and your group to continue to damage the enemy while remaining unharmed. Ricochet Seeker is another attack available to magic archers, and this closely resembles a hail of lightning-tipped bullets that bounce off nearby surfaces, perfect for trapping enemies. But next we have the Mystic Spearhand Vocation, sure to be a favorite of many players, which combines melee and magic attacks, making them a well-balanced vocation that is effective from any range. The Mystic Spearhand is a master of their unique weapon called the Duo Spear, and using magic they can paralyze enemies or hurl objects and even hurl enemies using the ability called Humble Offering. So you can think of the Mystic Spearhand as Dragon's Dogma's version of a Jedi Knight, quickly teleporting into close range and then smashing enemies away with powerful swinging spear attacks like the uppercut skill called Magic Cut. But the Mystic Spearhand is also a master of mobility, as skills like the Dragon's Foin allows you to quickly dash towards a target to unleash a deadly combo of up-close and in-person attacks. And the Seeching Storm ability summons 4 flying daggers to attack nearby enemies. But the Mystic Spearhand isn't just an offensive powerhouse. Defensive skills like the Mirror Vesture will craft a shield around you and your allies, making it much easier to revive a fallen companion without being interrupted. But then there is the Trickster Vocation, which is another unique addition to Dragon's Dogma 2, and almost plays like a pacifist type of build. As the Trickster, your main weapon is the Ceremonial Censer, and it does almost no damage when it's swung at an enemy, but instead allows you to conjure smoke to confuse them instead. This is where the name Trickster comes into play. For example, you could aggro a group of enemies with the Suffocating Shroud area attack, which is going to force them to chase you and then lead them to a cliff's edge, and use another ability called Tricky Terrace to create a smoke bridge that you can then trick enemies to walk out on and fall down to their death. The skill Elusive Divider has the opposite effect, creating a smoke barrier that will trick enemies to stop in their tracks. And you can even kite powerful bosses away from your group using the skill Effigial Incense, allowing your party to attack the same enemy from behind while the boss is fooled into chasing after your smoky doppelganger. Tricksters can also travel outside of their bodies using a smoke aura to investigate new areas, and they can even summon a huge smoke dragon, which we saw in some of the preview clips, so the range of possibilities here is pretty large. Now, the 10th and final vocation, called the Warfare, is going to allow you to use any weapon as well as multiple skills from different vocations at the same time, creating a completely custom class experience and playstyle. The ability to quickly change between a sorcerer's staff and a warrior's two-handed sword, for example, is going to be absolutely amazing and is sure to open up some truly unique gameplay experiences and builds in Dragon's Dogma 2. I am definitely looking forward to this one, but you might be wondering how you actually change your vocation. This can be done in Dragon's Dogma 2 at vocation guilds located in most major cities. There are also vocation-specific NPCs called Maesters, basically experts in a profession, from fighter all the way to trickster and warfare, that can help you learn new abilities. And we know of several Maesters already, such as Sigurd for the Mystic Spearhand vocation and Luz for the Trickster vocation. Players will need to complete some quests from these Maesters in order to unlock a vocation upgrade, typically having to do with retrieving a weapon for that NPC. And much like the original Dragon's Dogma, skills can be swapped in and out with many different possibilities and combinations, and skills are broken into 3 basic types, that being weapon skills, core skills, and augments. Augments are essentially passive buffs. And again, like the original, many skills have advanced forms which you can upgrade to. For example, the Thief's Biting Wind attack can be upgraded to Cutting Wind for an even longer range. Now, in terms of gameplay, we've already learned about every vocation and pawn, which will shape the variety and strategies you use for success in combat, but the environment also plays a factor in combat as well. For example, when faced with a powerful Cyclops early on in the game, players can choose to fight a brutal battle against it or break open a nearby dam with explosives to knock out this dangerous enemy with a flood of water instead. Be careful though, as certain enemies will also use the environment to their own advantage. Winged enemies like harpies and griffins can grab you or other party members and actually fly away with you into the air, which, if you fall from a great enough height, will result in death. Don't forget that just as in the original Dragon's Dogma, most large enemies can be mounted or climbed on to give you new angles of attack and the ability to access certain weak points. One example of this is the mega boss called Talos, a literal walking giant which you'll have to climb on in order to defeat while not falling or getting trampled over. Other bosses like the Sphinx offer a more cerebral challenge where you'll actually need to converse with the boss and answer riddles or solve puzzles. And many bosses like the Sphinx are entirely optional, and you might never even find them in the first place, so make sure to explore every corner of this massive game if you intend on conquering them all. But the entire world of Dragon's Dogma 2 is basically a living, breathing ecosystem. Wildlife reacts to your presence, and NPCs go about their daily lives, adding a layer of realism that enriches your adventure. In fact, over 1,000 characters inhabit the world, each with their own unique story and background. The actions that you take matter, and multiple paths often exist for solving a particular puzzle, side mission, or main story quest. Quests have a variety of different objectives, including the basic, saving of NPCs or finding missing items, to full-blown stealth missions with completely different outcomes depending on if you get caught or sneak all the way through to the end. You can even forge fake items like keys and try to pass these off as the real thing in order to solve a mission, and some quests may also have a different outcome based on the time you take to complete them. For example, if you wait too long to rescue a lost child in the woods, well, the child might not be alive when you find them, unfortunately. Crafting and alchemy enthusiasts can rejoice as Dragon's Dogma 2 brings an intricate system, allowing you to create powerful items, potent potions, and masterfully crafted gear. The world of Dragon's Dogma 2 is huge, with a map size of 4 times the original, but the developers have also strived to make it even more dense with NPCs to talk to, locations to explore, and of course monsters to fight. And for players looking to speed up travel across this massive world, one of your main options will be ox carts. These can help you travel longer distances more effectively, but random encounters can also occur, such as a bandit blocking your path, or a griffin suddenly landing on your ox cart and completely destroying it. Fast travel is an option, though it is limited. Like the first game, players can only fast travel between discovered port crystals, and every time you do, you must expend a fairy crystal, which are not cheap. And while traveling, you want to make sure to rest at a campsite, which is one of the few ways to recover your party back to its full health, though resting in the wilderness or other dangerous locations can again result in unexpected battles. So don't be surprised if you suddenly wake up to a cyclops towering over your sleeping bag. And camping will be one of the ways to advance the game's day and night cycle, which we know certain enemies such as wights and the Dullahan only appear at night, and this may be also helpful for advancing certain quests. But there you go, 101 things you need to know before playing Dragon's Dogma 2. If you guys found this video helpful, do me a favor and crush that like button so YouTube knows to share this video with others, and leave a comment below telling us what you're looking forward to the most in this massive new RPG. Shout out to War Thunder again for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to check out War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox, and use my link in the pinned comment or video description to register. Those of you who are new or haven't played it for 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including multiple premium vehicles, in-game currency, and more. Finally, if you'd like to see more Dragon's Dogma 2, then you should definitely check out this video next, where I dive deep into every vocation in the game, and I'll see you there.